gonna give up, I'll call it quits. I might as well just bleed out my wrists before it's over, before I go. There's one thing I want you to know. The world's in trouble, it's under siege. There's pirates out on the heavy seas. But when I'm with you aboard my rocket canoe, I have exactly just what I need. If you hope lightning strikes somebody that you just don't like, or you want the moon to fall, you'll never make it, not at all. And I'm so happy that you're around. It's better than living underground. But when the blackened skies meet the old white skies, nobody will be in the town.
This episode of Dopey is brought to you by Oro Recovery. Located in sunny Southern California, out in Malibu and Silver Lake, and somewhere in Western Los Angeles. It was created by our good friend Bob Forrest and his friends Evan, Jared, and Bob. Their mission: to create a rehab that treats alcoholics and drug addicts with connection and compassion rather than control. They have decades of experience in treating co-occurring mental health disorders, including severe mental illness. They make sure your detox is as comfortable as possible, which is critical when kicking heroin or benzos or crack or really anything. Everybody that I've ever known that's gone to Oro has only said amazing things. The people there are cool. The program is great. And the amenities you wouldn't believe. Sound bath meditation, yoga, equine therapy, and of course, the potentially spiritually transformative sweat lodge. If you're fucked and you're willing to go to sunny Southern California, I cannot suggest going to Oro enough. This episode of Dopey is also brought to you by our very good friends at Sober Buddy. There is a free, 100% free new sober tracker down to the second available at yoursoberbuddy.com. Download the tracker and show your clean time with pride. It's awesome. I love Sober Buddy. They have sober challenges that make it easier to be sober and to stay sober. You basically have a sober support in your pocket at all times. If you don't know who Sober Buddy is, it's the little blue fluffy guy you might have seen in sober memes on Instagram or Facebook. Over 60,000 people have already used Sober Buddy to help get them sober. I'm using it right now. It's totally available in iTunes and Google Play. Get the free tracker down to the second, 100% free at yoursoberbuddy.com. This episode of Dopey is also brought to you by our good friends at Dope. Dope is so delicious. It's an incredible company that makes ridiculously tasty cookie dough. Their dough is designed to either be baked into cookies or just eaten safely out of the container raw. So tasty. I cannot say enough good things about Dope. So delicious. They sent me the OG chocolate chip cookie and the Cookie Monster. I had the brownie before. All of it is ridiculously good. Their dough also comes in pints like ice cream, but they're filled with dough. Fucking amazing. I became aware of Dope because I saw their founder, Kelsey, on Shark Tank, and she's an addict in recovery just like us, and she believes in ending the stigma around drug addiction and shining a spotlight on recovery. A portion of every delicious sale of Dope is also donated to She Recovers, a nonprofit charity with a mission to connect, support, and empower women in or seeking recovery. Life is raw. Cookie dough helps. Use Dopey15 for 15% off at DOUGHP.com or find them in select stores nationwide. If you're going to get cookie dough, if you're going to get cookies, get it from Dope. Save 15% at DOUGHP.com, which is, of course, Dope. This episode of Dopey is also brought to you by our great friends at Evolution Accounting and Consulting. They are a full-service accounting firm that can help with your taxes, your bookkeeping, payroll, and almost any other business need you may have. Thanks to technology, they work with people from all over the country and pride themselves on building exceptionally strong relationships with their clients. They say that their passion allows you to pursue yours because they understand the stress caused by worrying about taxes and accounting issues. When you allow them to take this off your plate, you'll be freed up to focus on what you love to do. Perhaps even more important than anything else, the firm is run by a fucking crackhead. Fortunately, he's been in recovery for years now and knows the struggle as well as the success. Use promo code DOPEY when you connect with them at www.evolution-accounting.com to receive special discounts. All right, before we get to the show, I want to kick it over to my friend Ryan Hampton and his team at Mobilize Recovery. Mobilize Recovery is a great cause that's going national this September, and it's a project really close to my heart. It's a nonprofit organization and way for you to pitch in and help end overdose and addiction in America. There's a way for everyone to get involved. There is no cost and there is no hidden agenda. Mobilize Recovery is about you, your community, and what we can do together to inspire recovery solutions all across the United States. Here's Ryan.
Hey everybody, this is Ryan Hampton, recovery advocate and founder of Mobilize Recovery. And I'm jumping on with Dopey today because we need you to help end overdose, end addiction, and inspire solutions for recovery across the United States. This September, the nonprofit initiative Mobilize Recovery is launching a national bus tour in partnership with iHeartMedia and Google. And we want to learn what your community, your organization, and your projects are doing to mobilize for change. Help us map the journey across the country. Learn more today at mobilizerecovery.org and submit your ideas to us. There's so many ways for you to get involved and to help us highlight the recovery experience that is so unique in different regions across all 50 states. Go to mobilizerecovery.org to learn more and to help us map this journey. And I hope we get to meet so many of you this coming September during National Recovery Month.
That was Ryan Hampton. Support Mobilize Recovery. They're an amazing organization. And, go to Patreon, support Dopey. A lot of good stuff coming on Patreon. A lot of good gear available in the Dopey store. Just go to www.dopeypodcast.com. Enough with the fucking ads. Here's the fucking show. Welcome to Dopey, the podcast on drugs, addiction, and other dumb shit. And my name is Dave, and I'm at my dad's apartment. And I'm joined by strung out author, elite equestrian, unlicensed advice columnist, and woman about town, Erin Carr.
I just like to say that you don't need a license to be an advice columnist.
Well, you don't have a license.
I don't.
Does anybody have one?
Do you have a license to podcast?
I'm an unlicensed podcaster. It's true. But I think it's funny that you're unlicensed.
Funny. Yeah, because I'm not a therapist.
And we have a lot of funny stuff, a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. We have a very improbable guest today, a very outlaw artist from the Lower East Side named Clayton Patterson. Very interesting dude, very different sort of dopey story. And I had a funny Mother's Day story to tell, and I'm sure Erin had a bevy of funny COVID-related tales she wanted to share. But there's a crisis happening right now in the Dopey Nation, probably out of the Dopey Nation, where it seems to me like there's a large population of people relapsing.
I mean, it sounds that way, yeah.
And I have no judgment, first of all. I'm just scared.
It's terrifying. I mean, I have no judgment. I relapsed constantly when I was using, and before I got this long stretch of recovery, I was a chronic relapser. So I understand it, and it is terrifying because fentanyl was not in everything when I was relapsing.
Right. Fentanyl is in everything. And even if you're safer to relapse on weed or wine because there's probably no fentanyl in weed or wine or whites, whatever whites are. You know the song in Willin'? You know the song Willin'? He says, just give me weed, whites, and wine, and you show me a sign, I'll be willing. It's a Little Feat. Whites are speed.
I was going to say it must be some sort of pill right?
But they're probably putting fentanyl in whites these days too. The point is this, okay? Forget about, I would take even the fentanyl out of the situation.
Yeah.
I'm talking about people that I know that were working a program, enjoying themselves. Something happened, they relapsed, and now they're not enjoying themselves.
Right.
So I'm talking about, yes, I don't want you guys to die, but I also want you guys to enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
Enjoyment is very important.
It is. And, I was telling, Dave and I were talking about this the other day, and I was talking about that, like in 12-step programs, I remember a lot of people like sort of bouncing that idiom around like, oh, my worst day sober is better than my best day using. And no, there were some good times, but by far my worst day sober is nothing like what my worst day using was.
Right.
That's just like a hellish, it's like rolling the rock up the hill, like Sisyphus.
And I'm not saying like, I was just talking to a friend who's in a relapse and struggling. And like, as a drug addict, I'm like, well, are you having fun? How is it? Kind of like, I want to get that vicarious thing going.
Right.
Or also like, I'm pretty careful or I'm pretty deliberate if I'm going to have a guest on who's hardcore recovery or hardcore dopey. And we've done a bunch of like, not a lot of hardcore recovery in a little while. And I love the dopey, but I hate the dopey in the face of relapse. And I even hate the dopey more in the face of death. It's like nobody needs to be dying over the dopey.
Right.
And so I was talking to somebody and they were like, I really enjoyed getting high like last night, but now I'm fucking miserable. And the truth is, like, if drugs sustain themselves, dopey wouldn't exist. You know what I mean? It's like if we were getting high, if Chris and I were getting high, we never would have made 6 episodes. We would have done like 2 and then gotten too high to do it again. But if you can be if you could be a long-term joyful addict, go for it. I dare you. I dare you.
That's always the thing that like I think about, like, we wouldn't be sitting here if the drugs kept working.
Right. And we used to get emails. Like I remember me and Chris did the show and there was an email from some dude who was like a 30-year heroin addict still using.
Wow.
And I'm sure there are people out there. So if you're out there in the Dopey Nation using successfully, enjoying your life, please
kudos.
And write an email at dopeypodcast@gmail.com and I'll read the letter and get jealous and frustrated at your success using drugs. But I just want to say this, like, we're not, and Aaron especially, I'm a member of a 12-step fellowship. I do 12-step work. It fucking makes my life much better. It's like awesome. And I had this thought a long time ago, and I think I shared it on the show, but I definitely shared it at a meeting because I like to spit fire at meetings. It's like, and I, people give me shit when the show is too recovery centric, but like, I'm just throwing this out there. If you're struggling, the more stuff you're putting in front of using, the better chance you have of not using. So what I see it as, like, it's reverse strip poker. You want to fucking do as many things, especially if you're you're the opposite of this, sort of, because like you don't work a program, and I'm not chastising you. Right. You don't work a program, but you do other stuff.
But I was just going to say, I'm not in a 12-step program, but I do a lot on a daily basis to protect myself and to sustain recovery.
What do you do? Tell us about it.
Well, the number one thing is I take care of my mental health, which means that for me, it means
horseback riding, giving advice.
It's horseback riding. It's that I have a psychiatrist who I meet with regularly and I am on medication for my mental health issues.
Right.
It means that I have a therapist who I see weekly. It means that I started doing, why can't I think what it's called? It's a form of trauma therapy
Oh, that EMDR.
EMDR. Wow, that was like a brain moment.
It's bad that I know and you don't.
I know.
That's like a big problem. I just wrote down BetterHelp on a piece of paper and I spelled it with one T.
Yeah,
So we're even.
so we're even. Okay, I did that to make you feel better.
Thank you.
You know, I make sure that when I'm in like real crisis, I go back to like really basic level self-care stuff, which is like getting outside, listening to music, water. For me, like might sound stupid, but if I'm like having panic, if I get in the shower or I just go put my hands under cold water, it like cools down my nervous system. There's a list of a zillion things, and certainly 100%, you know, whether it's through the advice column or coming on here or corresponding with people who reach out to me, being of service to other people, which I know is also a tenet of 12-step programs, is something that is like just part of my daily life because it helps me not be on drugs.
Right. And also it makes your life better.
Yes.
You enjoy your life more because
Yes.
you do those things. And I think enjoying your life is another great deterrent from using.
100%. It doesn't mean I'm happy all the time, but in general, I'm satisfied with my life. Yes, I always want more. I want more for my career, more for my life. But I'm like striving for those things. I have a full life. I have friends. I have, you know, family, a husband, kids.
All right, you don't need to brag about it. It's like you can't help
no,
yourself.
But I'm saying that I wouldn't have, like, I didn't think when I was using that any of that was possible. And now, like 19 plus years later, like my life is something that I never dreamed was possible.
Right. And I started this podcast with 4 months sober. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I started this podcast with 4 months sober, talking about the worst things I had ever done with a friend who did the same thing. And I never thought I would get to this point of my life, you know, like basically 6 years and a few months later. Mm-hmm. And like, it's only from not using, really. It's like, it's from doing all these good things, but it's also just from not using.
Right.
Like, you just have to, if you want to not get fucked up on drugs, you have to not take drugs. And that's a very simple thing to do. And then you add all these good things. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You add good things. I feel like I'm not making any sense right now.
I understand what you're saying. And I also just want to say that, like, there are lots of paths to recovery. Recovery doesn't mean abstinence for everyone. There are a lot of people out there who find recovery through being on Suboxone for a length of time and then coming off of it or whatever. The point is that you're making steps toward recovering your life. And like that's something I think is really important because recovery doesn't look like just one thing. So if you
However, though, I think this is interesting because we do that shit on Dopey and we say, let your freak flag fly, do what suits you. And then I was just talking to somebody who's relapsing and they were this hardcore 12-step person. And then they got into the kind of, I can do Dharma, I can do smart recovery, I can do whatever. And like now all of a sudden they don't want to hear. It's because they started using.
It's because they started. I mean, the thing is that like any one of those things, whether it's Dharma, smart, whatever, like AA, whatever it is,
Abstinence.
is only going to work once they're ready for it. Once they're ready for it to work, and I mean, look, the truth is that like I think there's some of it's fucking luck. Because I think that I know people who I believe that that they really, really wanted it. And for whatever reason, the pull, like I had that so many times in my life when I was relapsing where like I really, really like I felt like I was being pulled in two directions. And for whatever fucked reason, the pull of heroin just remained stronger until it didn't. And I don't know, I think that sometimes there's a sort of like people inch their way towards being ready, even though they might really, really, really want it. It's not that they don't want it. They might inch their way there. But the problem is that you might fucking die before you get there.
Well,
so I hope you get there faster.
Hold on, no. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Like for me, I stopped using heroin and then I didn't really love being sober and I missed smoking weed. And then I started smoking weed and I had an opportunity to take benzos and I was like, oh, I like benzos once in a while. And then I got a little bit I got some like opiates,
Right.
Vicodin, Percocet. I was like, oh, I like these too. And I kind of smoked weed every day, and I took pills once a week. And I was like, I don't want to go back to heroin though. That's too much. And then I was like, I was getting a little bit of the opiate high and felt good. And I was like, and I did heroin again, but it wasn't good. So I didn't go back to that. Now, when you got off heroin, and I'm sure we've talked about this before, did you ever like be like, I want to just use pills now? Or I just want to do crack, or I just want to like do something else and like as a maintenance dose.
No, I mean, I don't know that would have worked for me. The last couple of years of my using, I was like nothing, like it just didn't do what it did for me before. Like I wouldn't get the release that I was looking for, no matter what it was.
But this is my fear. My fear is that I'm hearing from people who were hardcore heroin addicts, hardcore crack addicts, both. And then they hear about, like fucking microdosing. They hear about people who have a few drinks in their recovery.
Right.
They hear about people who smoke weed in their recovery, and they're like, well, why can't I do it? And they try to do it, and then they're fucking smoking crack and
Right.
shooting dope, or smoking dope and smoking crack, or whatever, because they can't do it.
Right.
And I think like I don't begrudge what anybody's recovery looks like. I
Right.
don't begrudge fucking anything, or if you're using or whatever.
Right.
I'm just saying, if you're a heroin addict or a crack addict, and I worry for those guys who are trying to smoke pot, or who are trying to take benzos or whatever. And I'm sure there's tons of you guys in the Dopey Nation who are smoking weed successfully. And I give you, more power to you. Like I applaud you. I'm a little bit jealous of you. I get ads from a Canadian fucking dispensary on my email, and once in a while I'll click on the ad just to see what's going on in the world of cannabis. And I listen, if you guys are out there and enjoying it, I say, good for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, and it's different. The problem is that it's going to be different for everybody. We're all, there's not a one size fits all solution, and I don't begrudge anyone, experimenting with what they think is going to work for them. I know a lot of people who used and then later on went to smoke pot and it was fine, but I think it's a big risk. And I hope that, I just hope that the people who find themselves like relapsing onto their drug of choice and going down that rabbit hole again, that they don't die.
Exactly. And that you have a good life. And that's enough of my preaching. Now I want to tell you.
Yes.
And I know Aaron's going to keep preaching during this episode. That's enough of my preaching. I'm going to tell you my funny Mother's Day story.
Okay.
How was your Mother's Day? Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. My Mother's Day was okay. I didn't really do much. My wish for every Mother's Day is to just be left alone.
That's what every mother's
I
wish
know.
is. It's like so
It is.
fucked up. It's like every mother is just like, I want to go shopping today. I want to go to the spa. I want to pretend I don't have children
Yes,
today.
because we get to be moms every other day of the year. And so on Saturday we saw my in-laws so we could celebrate Mother's Day with my mother-in-law, which is great. She's really great about this. Every year she's like, we'll celebrate Mother's Day on a different day that's not Mother's Day. Like we'll get together, have dinner, lunch, whatever. Fantastic. I love this plan because then on the actual day, my husband will take over and I mean, I didn't get like the full day off, but I had a few hours to myself. So that was nice.
Linda had no time off on Mother's Day, but we woke up in a water slide park, and she was really happy to wake. She said, according to Linda,
Yeah.
she was very happy to wake up in a water slide park with her kids and
Good.
me. And we went in a big hot tub on Mother's Day, and we went on water slides and got in the wave pool and all this stuff. And I've been going there, I'm realizing, for years. Because I remember years ago talking about it on Dopey. I think it was right after Chris had died. Or maybe Chris was... No, I think Chris was still alive the first time. And I was sitting at the top of the slide looking at like a panel of lights. And just thinking like, this could just be rehab. Those could be lights that I see, a panel of lights in a hospital.
Right.
But instead, I'm going to go down a water slide
Right.
because I'm free. And also, like, the water slide park is this place called Kalahari. It's this warehouse. And it's like, it could so easily be a hospital or a jail
Right.
or a fucking rehab because the hallways smell like rehab to me. The food all smells like,
Cloroxy.
yeah, or just like, it's like wet people,
Right.
cleanser,
Yeah.
fucking people, carpet, and it's like that institutional smell.
Do you stay there too? Is there a hotel?
Yeah.
Oh, you're like literally there.
You don't leave.
Right.
We got there on Friday. We stayed till Sunday.
Wow.
But we had a good time.
That's good.
And except the fucking arcade, it's like the casino for children.
Yeah.
And Nora pulled some shenanigans. I'm not going to tell that story.
Yeah.
The story I'm going to tell is we go home to have Mother's Day dinner with my mother-in-law, and I didn't get her anything for Mother's Day, and I like to get something for her for Mother's Day. So we get home from the trip, and we're gonna have her and Linda's dad over, and we're gonna cater it with Chinese food. And so I order the Chinese food, and I'm like, fuck, I forgot to get something for Linda's mom. I'm just gonna tell her. I said to Linda, I was like, I'm just gonna tell her I have something for you tomorrow.
Right.
And Linda's like, I don't think that's a good idea. Linda's like, I think you should go out and find something for her now. It's fucking 6 o'clock. You know what I mean? On Sunday night, on Mother's Day. I was
Wait,
like,
so you get her something separate
from
like,
Linda? Yeah.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
I know. I said, Linda, can I be on your present? She
Right.
said her present was too small. And it says, I love you, Mom.
All right.
But if it's my present, she's getting on my fucking present. Anyway, so I was like, I had a plan. I always have a junkie kind of plan. My plan was to go to the supermarket, which we call Stop and Shop. And I was going to go to Stop and Shop, and they sell orchids at Stop and Shop. And Linda's mother loves orchids.
Okay.
So I was like, I'm going to go buy an orchid at Stop and Shop. So we go to Stop and Shop, or I go to Stop and Shop before I'm going to get the Chinese food, and there's only one orchid, and the orchid looks good, but the pot is cracked. And obviously all the orchids are sold out.
Right.
And the only reason no one bought that is because their mother don't want a cracked
Right.
pot.
Right.
I wouldn't have cared, but I know Linda's mom would not have liked the cracked pot. And so I'm looking around, I can't find anything, and then I remembered there were plants outside, and I bought a basket of purple mini petunias that I thought looked great. I was like, this is going to be the ticket. And I go to stand in line, and who is in the supermarket?
Her mother.
Linda's mother. And she's laughing her head off.
Because she watched you.
Yeah, she sees me. And then,
good.
for whatever reason, I decide to lie. Like, I don't lie. And this is like, I was talking about this at a meeting. Like, I don't lie, and it's part of the defense against the fucking first drink or I don't even drink. It would be the defense against using. It would be trying to work a program, trying to do the next right thing, not lying. Put the fucking shopping cart back. I don't fucking play around because I like think of stealing every time I'm at the supermarket. Like, I don't not think of stealing when I'm in the supermarket. I was thinking about stealing the plant, thinking about stealing the card, thinking about stealing a cake because I like stealing. Okay,
I've never stolen anything from a store ever in my life.
I've stolen a lot. I enjoy stealing. I know my dad doesn't like to hear that, but whatever. Anyway, so she sees me and she's laughing at me, and then I say to her, I said, Sue, I was honest at first. I said, Sue, this is your Mother's Day present, but I have another present waiting for you at the store, but the store was closed. It's like such a fucking bullshit junkie story. Like that I tell her for no reason.
Right.
This is a perfectly good present.
Right.
This present is great. She's like, oh, that's really beautiful. And I was like, don't worry. Tomorrow I'm going to pick up the real present, And then the next morning I went to a meeting and I'm thinking, why
did you make up that lie?
Why am I lying to my mother-in-law at this point? So then I had the choice of either coming clean or going and buying a present at the store.
Yeah.
And I went and I bought the present at the store. Brought beautiful white orchids.
Oh, nice.
Double fantasy. Or I don't think they're really called double fantasy. I'm lying on Dopey. They're like white on white, fucking beautiful orchids. And she was happy. She got them. That's that. And she also, of course, took all the leftovers home from Mother's Day dinner in classic Sue fashion. So we do, we work with Sober Buddy.
Yes.
I work very closely with Sober Buddy these days, which is very exciting. We actually did an Instagram Live yesterday.
I caught a minute of it and then my phone rang.
I'm going to start doing Dopey Instagram Lives. What do you think about that?
I think it's great.
What do you think, Dopey Nation? If you want to watch a Dopey Instagram Live. Write me an email at dopeypodcast@gmail.com. And really gigantic things are coming for Dopey. So I hope everyone's fucking buckled in big time. All right, now we're going to do our Sober Buddy Challenge. You ready for the Sober Buddy Challenge?
I'm ready.
It's easy to get so busy. And Sober Buddy's an app. You get it at yoursoberbuddy.com. They now have a free tracker. Up to the second tracking. Anyway, it's easy to get, and this is the challenge, the Sober Buddy Challenge. It's easy to get so busy you neglect your social life. Creating a yearly friendship holiday is a great way to make time to get together. Some ideas: Annual Beach Day, Friend Appreciation Day, or Triangle Day. Whatever you want to call it, as long as you make it happen. And then they give you an article for creating friendship holidays. And I was talking to Erin about this, and she said, what is the ultimate friendship holiday?
DopeyCon 3.
DopeyCon 3. So and my dad is his usual nervous wreck of himself. He's like, I don't think anyone's going to come. I don't think they're going to come. And I think people are going to come.
I think people will definitely come.
Some potential guests include, like I said, Brandon Novak said he'd come. Mm-hmm. Fucking Amy Dresner said she'd come.
Yep.
Skinny Vinny said he'd come. Aaron Carr is going to come.
Yes.
Maybe Aaron Lee Carr will come.
Yeah.
Perhaps Peter Rosenberg will make an appearance. And it will all be catered by Katz's.
Yay!
Katz's Deli is going to be cutting pastrami, corned beef, brisket, and turkey. So this is going to be and we're looking at venues tomorrow. Mm-hmm. We will have a venue. There will be fucking hand-cut pastrami, crazy Dopey. Fucking Riley Walker said he'd come and play a tune if he's in town. Maybe Ray Brown will come out of retirement, but I'm not counting on that.
Some
one.
Exclusive merch?
I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe.
Really?
Maybe some
have to have DopeyCon.
We did
merch.
DopeyCon merch, and I still have some. If you want a DopeyCon t-shirt,
it doesn't have to say DopeyCon.
Write me an email.
It's going to be special merch that you can buy at DopeyCon.
Right, that's what I did at DopeyCon. At DopeyCon 1, we had DopeyCon shirts. I figured we'd sell them like hotcakes.
They don't have to say DopeyCon.
We actually did sell a lot of them.
Yeah.
All right. So there will be exclusive DopeyCon 3 merch. You better fucking come. It is October 1st.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah, you'll see each other, whatever. It's going to be great. And Erin was talking about things she does to avoid using and having a miserable life. And one of the things she talked about was therapy. Yes. And I do therapy too. And I actually did online therapy today. And this episode of Dopey is actually brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Because BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy. Give it a try and see if online therapy can help lower your stress. Sounds good to me. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and Dopey listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/DopeyPodcast. That's BetterHelp.com/DopeyPodcast. So listen, before you fucking use, I don't want to be Mr. Recovery. I'm not Captain Recovery.
Right.
However, I care about the people in the Dopey Nation.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened, but I really care about the audience. I love you guys. If you want to use, like, more power to you. But if you find that you're in a place that you don't want to be, please reach out. Reach out to me. Reach out to each other. Go to a fucking meeting. Get therapy. Like, do something. Like, I was traumatized by the deaths in our community. Like, I was traumatized by them.
Yeah.
And it hurts me to this moment to think about Chris and Todd and Colleen and Liam and Troy and what's his face, fucking kid, Andrew and Dave Marshall. And I don't want, if you're out there relapsing, I don't want you to be the next name. Like, when I hear about people relapsing, I'm like, fuck, they're gonna fucking die, and then we have to do a whole thing on Dopey about them. Right. I'd much rather you get it together and we do a whole thing about you getting it together.
Yeah.
All right. So there's a man from the Lower East Side named Clayton Patterson. And I don't know. I thought he had an interesting story.
Yes, I'm very excited to have people weigh in on what they thought.
It's not like he's like a crazy drug addict, but he's totally crazy drug addict adjacent.
Absolutely.
So here we go. Clayton Patterson.
about God. You want to talk about God? We'll talk about God.
Do you want to talk about God?
We want to talk about God. God and dope. No.
Hello and welcome to Dopey, the podcast on drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. My name is Dave, and this is a treat for me. I'm on Essex Street. We're on the Dopey mobile unit. As everyone who listens to the show knows, I've been working at Katz's for 14 years. What they don't know is there's a lurking celebrity on the Lower East Side, an underground art legend named Clayton Patterson, and he comes into Katz's all the time, and I'm like, who's that guy? And they're like, that's Clayton. And I investigated a bit, and Clayton's a photographer, an artist, a designer, hat maker. Does that make you a haberdasher?
I guess so, but it doesn't make me president.
No, but welcome to Dopey.
The one president was a haberdasher.
Who is that?
Truman, I believe.
He was a hat maker?
I believe so.
I've always been intrigued to meet you and to talk to you, and I've talked to you randomly. I've said, hey, what's up, kind of like from afar as I carried matzo ball soup around Katz's. But what I knew about you was the pictures of dope bags. But I want to know the story of Clayton Patterson. All
right. Well, first you started off making me very nervous.
Why?
Well, you have this podcast called Dopey, and you have a treat. I'm thinking, okay, dope treats. You know, you meet a junkie, says, hey, I got a treat for you.
So you're worried that the matzo ball soup might be souped up?
A treat. No, thank you very much for the matzo ball soup. But, yeah, I've documented the Lower East Side for many years. One of my greatest blessings was doing the front door. Now, you see, I've been underground for a long time. And because of my front door, I don't speak Spanish, but I've documented a lot of the Hispanic community. And if I take my front door pictures, for example, because I got kids when they were going to PS20 across the street, 6 years old, and then they grow up. Some of them now have grandkids. But this is an inner city area. My area between Houston and Delancey was definitely overlooked part of the Lower East Side and was definitely, without question, a dope haven. Coke and dope. This was the area. And so these kids grow up. And, of course, because it's a front door, I put 32 pictures in the window, so it made a lot of street kids famous.
When did you start putting pictures in the window?
Probably about 86, 87.
And to say it was a dope neighborhood then is understating it, right?
Oh, you know what I do? I ask people, who buys dope mostly? Who's the customer in Harlem that buys dope? And everybody will think for a couple of minutes because they kind of have to step softly on this. And they'll say, well, black people. And I said, yeah, exactly right. Now, the reason I bring that up is if you look at the Lower East Side was accessible by bridges, by tunnels in and out of the city easily. And it was probably the largest commercial dope spot in the world.
Because you're not obstructed by being in Harlem, fear of being uptown, all that shit. You're in two seconds. You're in the East Village, then you're in proper Village, then you're downtown, and you feel safe.
Our Greenwich Village,
sure.
Our Tribeca, our Wall Street.
But back then, I remember Katz's didn't have stalls on the bathroom door because junkies would pass out in there. So
it was definitely there, an abundance of junkies. But you remember the lemos that would come down here? You'd have lemos parked down here, running in, getting drugs, coming out. So the point that I'm getting to is there's almost no history of dope on the Lower East Side. And it's right beside Chinatown. It's right beside Little Italy. Where did the drugs come from that supplied the city? I don't know. I'd probably guess China and Italian.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, where's the proximity to Little Italy and Chinatown? It's right across the street.
So when did you come to the Lower East Side?
I came here in '79.
And punk rock was blowing up. CBs was happening, and heroin was embedded in that culture.
Oh, at that time, heroin was cool. I think even like Soho News and that, there was a cool factor about heroin because people really didn't realize the addiction, and it was the same problem with Coke. But back to the front door, you have to realize a lot of these kids who I almost became a father figure to a lot of them because a lot of them didn't have fathers or whatever. And by putting them in the window and making them famous, it was like really giving them love and attention. And I'm shocked. I've met people that just got out of jail for 20 years and they come over here and they get a hug and everything else because they remember that beautiful thing when they were a child of just the making them famous. But the point that I'm getting to is out of all of those, I've taken at least 10,000 different pictures in front of that door. So a lot of them, when they grew up, they became dope crews. They became major dealers. So that's one avenue of,
Documentation.
entry into the dope world. The other part that's completely uncovered is I have a dope bag history. I had a friend that was a bank robber. He was going to jail, so he had a mid-'80s dope bag collection, and he gave it to me. Now, you see, it's so amazing on so many levels because you hear all of this business about, we need to be able to spy more on these people. We need to get better equipment. We need to have better listening devices. We gotta, they gotta soup it up like the CIA. You want to know who sells dope in the building? Go to the kid in grade 1 across the street and says, who sells dope in your building? It's like the bags were tagged. So you ask any junkie, where do you get Hellraiser? Stanton and Ludlow. Where's the mystery? There is no mystery to the dope world. If there was a mystery, they wouldn't be selling it. They had lineups down here, all that stuff. The one part that I find most interesting, most troubling, is when Cuomo the Elder got into power, upstate New York was dying. So what did he do to bring it back? He built prisons. Every small town in upstate New York got a prison.
Became huge, yeah.
It became huge. And about a third of the prison population in New York State's from the Lower East Side. Now, we both know anybody who's a junkie is a dealer because he's the guy that goes down and picks up 10 bags or 10 bundles so he can give to his friends.
So he can get high for free.
So he can get high for free. And I've known, in a certain way, it's a deficit for white people. Because I've known a number of white people down here, for example, Richard Hamilton, who's a drop-dead junkie. If he had been thrown in jail for a year or two, he could have cleaned up and got healthy again, but he never did. And I've known so many people that are white that never got arrested, or if they got arrested, they got an overnight, whereas these Spanish guys, some get 20, 30 years or more. So all of a sudden, all the people that are arrested and go to jail are black and Hispanic, but in this neighborhood, the population that was buying the drugs was mostly white.
Right.
And they never went to jail. So it's kind of like, I don't know.
Every time I ever got arrested with heroin down here, it turned into disorderly conduct and they'd let me go in the morning.
That's right.
Now, you weren't a drug user.
No.
What drew you first to the Lower East Side and then to this culture?
Well, when I first got here when Elsa, my wife, and I got to New York, we were living at 325 Broome Street, same building as Keith Haring. He lived upstairs. He was an amazing kid. But I was making it in the art world. I had a guy like Richard Brown Baker buy my art and like that. And it was just, I hated that world. I think I had some stuff in the Brooklyn Museum. And this was like 1982. So what happened is that this end of town was really
bad.
And so I just didn't like that world. It was all about competition and gossip and, did you see what he does? Or he can't paint, but he can. I just wasn't interested in that whole kind of social clamming. That I just wasn't me. So we moved over to the Lower East Side. First night we were here, somebody got shot across the street. And we had 24-hour drugs outside the place. But I felt comfortable here. And then the other thing about taking all these kids in the front door, most of them, 90% or more, were Hispanic. And I looked at them and I thought, wow, you look like the kids that I grew up with. So
how's that?
I come from the bad end of the working class. I grew up with all kinds of kids that looked just like them, kids that ended up going to jail or, troubled families and homelessness. I left home between grade 9 and grade 10. So I was familiar with that culture, not the Spanish culture, but that youth
poverty,
yeah,
working
poverty,
class shit.
Working class stuff.
I get it.
So actually, I worked for this Jewish landlord who I admired because he was a Holocaust survivor. And when he came here, he hooked up with 2 or 3 other people, and they bought buildings in the cheapest place in Manhattan at that time for them downtown. That was the Bowery. So I became sort of the manager of his buildings. He had 5 buildings because the whole idea was not to work. Not to have a job. You got to work to make money, but, I could do the managing thing, which would be the hookup guy, finding a plumber, finding an electrician. And then we had our tenement floor, which was a railroad, and we could sublet it for 2 years. But working for him, I realized that it was possible to come to two things happened. One, when I'd gone to school in Nova Scotia, and we took a weekend trip here, and that's when the Bowery was the Bowery and all. So when I saw that, I knew I could live here.
It was like a romance, and it was also like real. It's real New York City, and it feels like old New York City. You know, trash cans on fire, and William Burroughs is living down the street and all that.
And it was accessible.
Right.
So by working for him, I realized, because then I moved into a commercial space, and this guy was totally honest and right up front. He says, Clayton, you got to realize you have 2 years on the to sublet, but after that, either you go back there, or the rent in that loft where you have, which is 3,500 square feet, will just go up because it's a commercial space. And I knew we couldn't do it. So we spent a year and we bought a building. We bought a building on Essex, and at this time, you couldn't give property away down here.
I heard they were selling buildings for like $1 if you beat the crackheads out. Or that was when I used to work at Katz's in the front, they would tell me stories like that like when it was so bad down here that people didn't, because the crime was so bad and the buildings were so infested with vermin and drugs and squatters and poverty that they were like giving away buildings. How truthful is that?
Parts of that are true, and the copper pipes were missing and stuff like that. I think the person that we bought it from, he was with the city, so I think he bought it for a lot less than I did. But they
was that this building?
Yeah.
Wow.
But then what he was charging was still within our range. But we went to 42 banks, and we couldn't get a mortgage. And then I also went up to the vice president of Citibank office, wanted to go to the president's office, got to the vice president and talked to the secretary. And by talking to the secretary, of course, it's like talking to
her people.
And so they called that night, and we explained, because there was a sewing factory downstairs. So even though we didn't have a stable income per se, the sewing factory was rent, and that was stable. And there was a wedding dress place in the front. So that we got the mortgage.
Amazing.
So that was a time when you could kind of use your head,
figure some shit out,
and make it happen. People don't realize how much they've killed in New York.
Well, I think people do. It's like it's like it's a different place. You know?
But you could haggle. When was the last time you haggled for prices in Manhattan?
I haggle as much as I can because it's in my blood to haggle. I'm a haggler. I have to. It's like when I don't haggle, I'm disappointed with myself.
Well, I'm a haggler too, but almost every time you go somewhere, that's the price.
No shit. Yeah, I mean, and also like, there's no choices. No. You know what I mean? Like,
you go to Best Buy and you say, "Can I buy 10 of those?" The same price.
Right. I can haggle for an umbrella on the street.
On the street.
You can't haggle in a store.
No. And before you go to, let's say, they were selling suits on what's his name, Sion Mizrachi. He started off as a kid. I did a 3-volume Jewish history book, which is a people's history. So he tells the story like when he was a kid, he worked for his father's store. So people would go in there, and his what he had to do was sell suits, which were like $15. So it was a top, 2 pairs of pants, and a vest. So they say, well, okay, what about if I get rid of the vest? Okay, well, we can have it for $12. Well, what about 1 pair of pants? Okay, so I get the jacket and pants, $8. You got it.
Nice.
You can't do it anymore.
You craft your deal.
Yeah, New York was about deals. Everything was a deal. The parking meter. That parking meter doesn't work. You can park there all day. Everything was a deal.
Good trash. You put the brown bag over the parking meter. That was my favorite.
Yeah. The school closes for the weekend. So, after 4 on Friday till 8 or 7 on Monday, you got the free parking.
Well, the coolest, you have to admit, like at Katz's is run by guys who were the kids on the Lower East Side.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Fred Dell, yeah, absolutely.
But the Dominican guys are so plugged in to this neighborhood.
Definitely.
And, like, they still know how to do parking shit like that. They still make trades. Like, there's still, like, it's a dying culture.
There is an underground for certain things if you know the right people.
There's an underground barter system.
But you really got to be, plugged in to get there.
Yeah, I've been working at Katz's for 14 years, and I'm like, I have a toenail plugged in, and then if I think I do, I'm out. You know what I'm saying?
So one of the things is I was on Bourdain's Parts Unknown, and how did he? And I hooked him up with a number of people to be on that show. So he put me on the show. And why did he come to me?
You tell me. Because you're the underground legend of this neighborhood.
No, he called me the godfather of Lower East Side documentary and the archivist of everything known or something. But anyway, it really was about, there was a dope bag called Toilet. And two things happened to him. He used to do a lot of heroin. So he came down here one day, and he was riding back uptown in a cab with 4 other people. And he heard this statistic, 4 out of 5 people that are junkies, 4 are going to die. And he thought, I don't want that to be me. And the second thing was toilet. He had a bag of toilet. And he thought, what am I doing shoving toilet into my veins?
And that was his moment of clarity?
That was his moment of clarity. And the other thing that people don't realize is all these people that are selling drugs are your pharmacists. You know, they have, some of them are uneducated. Some of them basically came off a farm and they're here in New York and they're selling dope on the street. People don't know what they're buying from those people. And dope is the kind of thing where it doesn't really give you the memory of whether, you know, if this was better than last time or better. But you can't, it's
It's
not
a hard litmus test for sure.
Yeah, it's not a connoisseur drug.
No, you can pretend it is.
You can pretend.
You can pretend it is. What was I going to say? Like, you're a photographer.
Yeah.
Like, who were your early influences when you started?
Well, I really started off as an artist. Almost everything I did kind of out of necessity, or it just sort of happened that way. That's how I got into cap making. You know, we eventually created the Clayton cap. We were the first people to put embroidery going around the cap, first people to brand it on the outside, first people to make custom hats for people. We did a lot of stuff. The industry was leaving New York in 1986, and we had basically run of that world until 1995. But all these outfits now, they have all the designs going around. That's all us. But we're unknown in the fashion world because we were a little underground shop in the Lower East Side. But we created that kind of change.
It's amazing. So what was the first art that you were doing? Cat making was first?
No, I was making sculpture and things. And then I got into printmaking. And printmaking is what got us to New York because I was a really good lithographer and, fine art printmaker. And Elsa was really a good artist and knew everything about printmaking. So we got down here because at that period of time, there's no reason to be in America because they had enough plumbers, they had enough cooks, they had enough of everybody. But when Reagan got into power, they made prints tax shelters. And so the art world exploded with prints.
Right.
So we just fell into the right time, right place. But I got into photographing because, you know, I'm not really that social. I seem really social, but I'm not.
Well, you're very recognizable.
Yeah.
And you have been in the same spot for many, many years, so that has to come with some sort of like necessary socialness.
Well, you know, if I went to an opening, I'd probably hang out for a few minutes, see what's up, and then leave. Because I'm not going to go around and talk to everybody unless I know them. So the thing that the camera did was it gave me access to everywhere. You know, all of a sudden I got a reason to go to the Pyramid Club. I got a reason to get into the inside circle, let's say the basement, the dressing room of the Pyramid Club, and take pictures of all of those people. You know, it got me into, like, I like to do something when I'm there. So when I go see bands, I'm taking pictures, it gives me something to do.
Sure, it's also something that makes it so you don't have to talk to anybody.
Exactly.
It's a great skill. Like, I'm not particularly socially. I mean, like I'm like an introverted extrovert. Like I like talking to people, but like one person. Like I don't love, like if I'm in a group of people, I don't really feel that comfortable to talk to the group.
But as a waiter, your social skills are perfect.
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? What's going on? First time in New York? Oh, that's cool. Oh, you ever tried mushroom or matzo ball soup before? Yeah, it's Jewish. You're in a Jewish place. What do you want?
The best thing about waitering is that every table leaves. You know, that's the best part.
Exactly.
It's very, you know, it comes and it goes. Now, when you started shooting the band scene, who were you shooting?
Well, everything took me to somewhere else. I didn't take myself there. So I got to the Pyramid. I'm photographing my front door. There's a drag queen around the corner called Peter Quayloff, who eventually changed his name to Sun PK. And he said, hey, would you like to document me getting dressed at the Pyramid Club for my drag show? I thought, great, why not? So I go to the Pyramid Club and I start photographing him. And the security at the Pyramid was the hardcore scene, like Ray B's and Jimmy Gestapo, Murphy's Law, and Warzone. So they were like major players in the hardcore scene. Now all of a sudden I'm doing the hardcore scene. And then from the hardcore scene I meet doing videos and photographs, I meet people in punk bands. And then I meet people like the Brain Eaters and, just a large litany of underground bands. G.G. Allen, his last performance, his first performance when he got out of jail.
What was he like?
You want to know what? I think it was a setup.
What do you mean?
When you met him privately, he was like a very nice guy. Elsa, my wife, really liked him because he was very just kind of...
He was famous for like cutting himself and shitting and rubbing the shit into his cuts and
But
stuff,
what I
right?
say, it was a conspiracy in a sense. They doped him up with heroin, and they fed him Jack Daniels, and then they turned on the switch, and he went nuts.
Who's the they, though? Isn't he the they?
People in the band. Well,
Right.
I'm just saying that the way to really get him going is to crank him up. The way to crank him up is to give him dope and Jack Daniels, and then he just hits the nut zone. And he was nuts, and he was a big guy. He was like a bruiser. So all of a sudden he would like crush a Coke can and throw it in the audience. I mean, he would shit on stage. He would just arbitrarily go out and punch people. So there's a movie out called Captured, and it's by Dan Levin and Ben Solomon, and it's about Elsa and I. And G.G. Allen is in it. That's the day of his last performance. But you see, he died from heroin overdose. And, so he went out that night, fell in the rug, his nose bent over sideways because he passed out on the rug. And, that's how he ended up being dead, with a disfigured face and, dying late face down on the floor.
Horrible.
And it was heroin.
Did you know the John Joseph and the Cro-Mags and them?
I know John Joseph.
I had him on the show. He was was really, I thought it would impress him that I worked at Katz's, but I didn't know he was like this big vegan.
Yeah, you work at the wrong place for him.
He was not impressed.
Oh, meat is murder. That's him.
Yeah, for sure.
So you work at an abattoir. Everything in there is dead.
Exactly. So tell me more. I want to get to how you become the archivist of heroin, the archivist of the Lower East Side.
Well, by being, heroin was really filtered through the whole culture. The working culture, the creative culture, it was really everywhere. You could go even to Orthodox bakeries down here, and the guy in the back, the Sun or whatever, was
Had a
into
habit
dope.
or something.
Yeah, had a habit. So I would meet different people that were really amazing. And I just got pulled into it. Like, I've documented a lot of formication. That's when, I used to have this one particular person who used to shoot up, a couple of people, actually. Well, more than that. But when they start shooting coke, they'd all of a sudden start picking themselves. And then they would think that there were bugs in their skin. And they would pull out little pieces of skin and say, you see that? It's a worm. It's a worm. And, that's a phenomena that people should be aware of that are dabbling in drugs.
That this can be an outcome.
Oh, it is an outcome.
I know.
It is an outcome. Then you start seeing people with all kinds of little scabs
Pock
on their
marks
faces,
and shit,
pock
yeah,
marks
sure.
and things. So I've documented a lot of that. I've documented a lot of people shooting up. I've documented people like, Richard Hamilton, the famous artist. So a lot of people. One thing that happened to me when I was 5 years old, I had to go to church. I hated going to church. I hated it. But so what happened was they brought in these missionaries, and these missionaries had these films. And I remember they had this little black kid, like a baby, and he's black, right? Because I'm 5 years old, I see black. And then all of a sudden he's all red because he's been cut up, and he's covered in blood. Then all of a sudden they take soot and things, and they go over the cut marks, and that's scarification. Tattoos, scarification, Africa, this whole thing. And they were chipping teeth. And they had the big snake skin that went across.
Wait, where was this?
Oh, this was in a fundamentalist Christian church in Calgary, Alberta, where I'm from. But they have missionaries. And I saw that stuff, which is supposed to be paganism, and it's really awful. And we go, that's the devil in there. And I looked at that stuff, and I thought,
wow,
this stuff is great.
Fascinating.
And so I sort of got pulled into that, and sort of because of that.
What do you think about it was so fascinating? What aspect of that ritual really like turned you on, for lack of a better word?
I guess, it wasn't scary. Like it should have been like a horror film, like when they're in high school, they show you drunk driving crashes or something. I just got really intrigued by it and thought, wow, this is really fascinating. And it's really fascinating that cultures would do something like that.
It's so different from
It's
the
so
classic,
different.
like, whatever, American, Canadian, middle class life. It's the most different thing that you could imagine, really.
And it's with adult supervision.
Right.
So it wasn't like a bunch of kids in Africa that were poking themselves with knives and scarring themselves. It was part of the tradition of the tribe, and with the adult supervision, it kind of took away some of the horror of the thing.
Because the adults said it was okay.
Well, yeah, because all these adults are there, it's okay. You know the kid's going to live, and you know that for them it's the right thing to do. So I was eased in by that.
So, like, you were interested in the ritual of that, and then when you got here, it's a much different ritual, and there's still sort of adult supervision, but I can see the similarity for sure.
I'll tell you another thing if people are into looking at art. If you look at Richard Hamilton's gold paintings, his beautiful paintings done with gold leaf and with they look like Turner paintings because there's like this black and these subtle sort of blacks that sort of tumble across the horizon. It looks like a skyscape. But that is blood. So the dark reds in that and the blacks are actually blood because he puts blood into the
paint,
into the varnish. But if you next time when you see one of those paintings, I want you to look at it because if you look at the dope when they first do the first plunge and then pull it back out, and then the blood comes back into the tube, all of a sudden it just rolls across like a landscape. And I think that's what it is. I think it's a landscape of the drugs being pulled out in the syringe. And when I look at those paintings, I could just see it.
That's very interesting. It's like I can't remember the movie, but like, and there's something fucked up about this that like every drug addict probably was influenced by some movie or some song or some scene. And I don't remember the movie anymore, but it was some movie that showed injecting heroin when they first, what you're talking about, when they're first registering the blood and it comes into the clear syringe and it mixes with the drug. It is like, it's mind-blowing scientific. It's magic. It's like alchemy.
It is magic.
And
it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And it's like, see, you never did it.
No.
So break that down because you're drawn to how it looks.
Right.
You see the beauty in it because it is mind-warpingly beautiful. It's like,
In a way.
It's a weird mystical science fiction-y kind of thing.
It is. I mean, there's a lot of magic attached to heroin. There's no question about that. And it's just, you see that tumbling. I'm talking about, it's not beautiful that the fact that they're shooting up and
Of course.
that part of it, but just the syringe part when the
when the
liquid,
blood gets pulled
when
in.
the blood gets pulled in, absolutely. And then, so then I run into creative people like this woman, Ann Ardolino, and she was like a poet and things. But I also have documentation of the paranoia. Like somebody shoots up, and then all of a sudden, this is with Coke, and all of a sudden, there's rats. They're coming on me. They're all over me. Get them out of here. Get them out of here. And the guy 2 minutes ago was just sitting there normally. And she used to get it with all this whole conspiracies about the worms and the drugs and the fact that it comes from South America. And
It all adds up really quick.
It all adds up really quick. And then she'd, maybe hide in cardboard boxes. It's a lot of stuff that I would be careful about making public because I don't want to make a farce out of it. I almost see it as scientific. I think some of the stuff with the pickings and things, it really, doctors and people like that or people that are interested in heroin should see that because it really is horrific.
Well, it's a scary consequence. It's also like I went to art school and I studied photography and I was really interested in like the New York the street photography and like Robert Frank and Klein, and all those guys in the what I'm talking about in the 40s and the 50s where they're starting to do that street stuff. And they're documenting or Robert Frank in
Cocksucker Blues.
Yeah, or in New Orleans, the Americans, that book. Like when they're documenting...
Oh, the Americans, yeah.
Beautiful book.
Beautiful book.
But they're documenting real life, and it's like, this is in Cocksucker Blues, right? He's documenting the Stones in the throes of this thing, right?
I didn't realize until recently there was one place down here that you could just go there and rent that, because I was always told that some place like the Whitney could only play it once a year because of a lawsuit, but it was floating around. But heroin, I think the other thing, you see what happened down here is I did a book called with Cochise, Jose Cuelas, Street Gangs of the Lower East Side. It's the only street gang book of the Lower East Side. But what happened is that you had street gangs down here like the Cato Nunchuckles, right? But what they did was they became a crew, a heroin crew. So all these street gangs, instead of being territorial about watching the neighborhood, one person, the other person like that, my block, your block, that kind of thing, they turned into drug crews.
Well, they made so much money, they kind of had to, right?
They had to, and then that's about bringing people in, not about keeping people out. So you're no longer defending the territory, you're bringing in as many people as you can.
Right, and you're trying to build up territory, and you're trying to make profits. You're at that point, right? It changes the whole dynamic from a street gang to a drug crew.
But, back to the Harlem thing again, I mean, American Gangster, Mr. Untouchable, all of that. There's so many books and stories and different histories that could come out of the Lower East Side that have never been touched. The heroin thing down here, which my claim is really, it was bigger than Harlem. It had to have been because of the diversity and the access. And just the volume of drugs that were here. A lot of drugs that went from here went to Harlem. You had people down here like the Allen boys used to deliver to the South Bronx and used to deliver to Spanish Harlem.
When did you get into documenting the bags?
The which?
The bags, the stamps.
Oh, that came from the bank robber giving me his collection.
So tell us more about that story, because it seems very interesting to me.
Well, for one thing, like back to the cops and spying and all of that, it's a map of the Lower East Side. The one thing is, you could ask any junkie. If we found a junkie from back in the day and showed him the dope bag collection, he would say GQ, 10th and 1st, Hellraiser, Ludlow and Essex, 7-Up, 3rd between, A and B, Bag in a Bag, 7th Street, the Laundromat. I mean, it's just, you could do a map.
How many bags were in the collection?
God, quite a number. I'm not sure exactly how many. I want to turn it into a book. I want to find a publisher that would be interested in that. You see, here's the other problem that I have. I went underground for years, and by being underground and covering the stuff that I did, I was completely isolated from the mainstream and from sort of the art world hierarchy and all of those places. So I basically cut off all my avenues of access to people who could be helpful, like publishers and stuff like that. Because if you think about it, if I did that dope bag collection book, I'm sure I could get people that were dealers down here, people that were in crews down here. I could get a view of the heroin trade down here that a lot of other people couldn't.
Of course. Why do you think, because especially in that time frame, there were so many outsiders who were brought in, like a Jean-Michel Basquiat or something.
Absolutely.
So why were you so I don't want to be a part of Soho. I don't want to be in that world.
Just because it was a social hierarchy.
Like Keith Haring.
I lived with the same building as Keith. Keith Haring is a phenomenon. First of all, he was a goofy, nerdy kid from Pennsylvania and gay. And you could tell he was gay.
Yeah.
So we know even if you're cool, and even if you come from Long Island, being here a few times as a kid, it takes you at least a couple of years to get into a crowd and find some people and start to hang out. He did it immediately.
Right.
Part of it was SVA, and it was just magic. He hooked up with Basquiat at that time, with Kenny Scharf, and his whole little crew. And they shot up the ladder. His career was 10 years, from beginning
to death.
To death. And most people, the first 3 or 4 years, is just becoming used to New York and meeting people and finding a place to go. He did all of that in 10 years. Now, I'm going to tell you another story here in a second. But he was always a nice guy, and he never stopped working. There's a phenomenon that happens. Once people start to get famous, they become, I'm all that. And it takes a period of time before you realize I'm just another Joe Blow in the world, and I'm not all that.
Right.
But he didn't hit that stage. He was always, accessible to people, always generous. But he worked with a guy called LA2. And if you look at this, has been one of my campaigns was to try to get LA2 recognized as Keith Haring's partner because he was.
No, I've heard about this. I've heard about this from Ivan.
Yes, and it's very important because if you go, you can go to a lot of museums, you can go to a lot of art collections, and you could see the Whitney book, the Keith Haring book. If you look at that damn book, a bunch of those pieces in there are LA2 and Keith Haring, and they're all Keith Harings.
Right.
Now, LA2 deserves to be recognized as his partner because he was.
He had some drug issue, right?
Well, I'm just getting to that. So after Keith died, because he had worked off and on with Keith for years, almost his whole career. Keith dies, there's nothing in it for LA2. He's just eviscerated. They cut his name out of everything. You know, I have I did a show here with a postcard. It was from a little booklet, Museum City of New York, Keith Haring. You look at the vase in the front, half of it's LA2. LA2 used to just write LA2, TNS's crew, and sometimes LA Rock. So LA gets into steering when he's here. In other words, Keith dies. He's now kind of desperate. He gets into showing people where to buy. A steer says, "Oh, you go down the block, you go in the brown."
What was
door,
he using?
He was steering. So he got arrested and went to jail. So when he got out of jail, he's depressed. He met an older woman and he married her. So after he married this older woman, he became stepfather to her son, who was the same age as him, and the son is Blue Boy.
Oh, my God.
And if you want to know who Blue Boy is, go to Vlad TV and watch it. Now, before, you see, I thought that people were intelligent, and I thought people would discover this. So that's another heroin. I mean, Blue Boy murdered somebody, but he talks about, like if you go to Vlad TV, about the drugs on the Lower East Side, the heroin. He talks about all of that from an early 80s, 70s perspective. Blue Boy, he spent most of his prison life in the box, solitary confinement. He's a very violent, dangerous person. He was one of the top 3 violent people in the New York State prison system. So he steps out of the box one day and says, "I'm a Crip." What? What, are you kidding me? You know, there's a whole thing you got to go. Who says? You understand? Who says? Get him to come and tell me that I'm not. So, you know, but when I told that to Dad, he freaked. He starts jumping up from his chair, and he starts screaming at me. "You got to leave. You're threatening me. You're threatening me."
Why?
And I don't know. It's his imagination. And so...
Who is Deitch?
He was an art dealer. He's the guy that ran Deitch.
He did, and he was selling Keith Haring stuff, and,
Yeah,
and
Keith Haring
it's like
stuff
you
and
were
all that.
trying to tell the LA2 story.
Yeah, I thought he would have woken up and thought, "Oh my God, we should do something about this. We should correct that book." Because if you think about it, when PhDs and people like that are learning to look at art, they learn to read the symbolism on the page.
Right.
And they'll all see this sort of like
This
LA
Rocks and whatever.
LA Rock.
Right.
And they will learn that as Keith Haring because that's what they're being taught, and it's a lie.
But I'm sure that happens in every scene of art, like dating way back, that there's somebody that like was with Rembrandt. we don't know who LA2 for Rembrandt was or something.
But in the Renaissance, yes, different people would paint the hands,
Right,
different people would
right,
paint the faces.
right.
But this is his art. This is his signature.
And he's still alive.
And he's still alive. But with LA2, the difference from another artist working, like let's say Kostabi, Mark Kostabi had other painters paint his paintings. But LA2 only did his own art. So there's no mystery to it. So I thought these people would eventually realize, "Oh, I paid $200,000 for this painting. It's a Keith Haring. Actually, it's a collaboration. I didn't know that. I want my money back."
But it's also, I mean, this is a fucked up opportunistic look at it. It's also an opportunity for someone to mine LA2 as this lost 80s legend.
But you have to, you know from doing the podcast, it's not that easy to get out there and to break into the larger market. And you really have to have somebody, sort of, managing and marketing you, because it doesn't happen on its own. I don't care how cool you are or how smart you are or what genius work you're doing. If you don't have somebody else translate that to the larger public, it ain't going to get there.
Right. You need your art dealer.
You need your art dealer, our presenter, or manager, or whatever it is.
It seems like LA2, though, is an unmined fucking gem.
It's a movie.
Right.
If somebody wanted to make a movie, that's it.
What was his drug,
also
though?
Blue Boy.
Yeah, I don't even know. Blue Boy was a dealer and a violent criminal?
No. He was, when he was an early teenager, somebody stepped on his sneakers on purpose, and he shot the guy and killed him at a big community gathering. So he went to jail for that. But the other thing about Blue Boy is he's the guy in jail that killed Larry Davis.
Wow.
Larry Davis is the dealer in New York that how he got off. He beat the charges because it got proven he was working with the police, but he shot 6 cops, and he got away with it. But they got him on another murder, and then he went to jail. But in jail, he stabbed and killed Larry Davis, American gangster, a hero in the black community for shooting 6 cops and escaping.
It's a deep, deep, deep history, huh?
Yeah, well, that's the one thing about knowing the history of a neighborhood and really documenting it. You can put together the roots. Most people get the surface. Heroin, Lower East Side, famous bag, body bag, 10 people died, Kennedy kid came down here and used this drug. But that's just the surface thing. If you want to know the whole culture of the thing, it's like being an anthropologist.
It is totally, it is cultural anthropology
It's
of
like-
heroin on the Lower East Side
Yeah.
or Cruz. Or, I mean, like, I just think you as an archivist of the Lower East Side is an incredible thing. And you have to do the Dope Bag book. You have
I
to.
got it, but people think of me as people call me a legend or whatever, and on the Lower East Side, I guess in a certain way I am. I mean, I've definitely had enough public things like with the police riot tape and all of that. I got
Tell the audience about that.
okay. On August 6th, 7th, 1988, I did a videotape which became known as the Tompkins Square Park Police Riot. It was 3 hours and 33 minutes long. I got 6 cops criminally indicted. Then people say to me, well, they all got off. I said, yeah, they all got off, but find out how many police brutality cases where the cop actually got criminally charged. Not very many. So that was a big stick with me. And it also changed how, and then I went on Oprah Winfrey, held up the camera, Little Brother's watching Big Brother. I changed the idea of the use of technology to document police actions and protests. There was now a handheld, affordable, accessible camera that people could use. So that opened that whole door.
And it gave some sort of power to somebody that wasn't on top of them. Like
Absolutely.
And you became not only an artist and an archivist, but an activist.
Oh, big-time activist. And, if you go through this was a big case, and I got 6 cops criminally indicted. You got to know, I wasn't like the best, I wasn't the NYPD poster boy, guarantee. I was hated by many. But if you go through the history of that period, or any of the Rodney King, almost any of the famous cases that were national, Tompkins Square was national, the video person is unknown. I'm one of the only people that stayed in the game and kept on doing it. I have an amazing archive of the protests and objectification on the Lower East Side. I documented that with Elsa, my wife. She was my backbone. But I did it with just sort of gusto and determination. Yeah, I got arrested a bunch of times, got knocked unconscious, had teeth knocked out. I paid a price for it. But I had, at that time, the determination and the drive to do it.
And now, like, where do you fit into the neighborhood? Like, are the cops happy to see you? Do you see the people that were on the door, on the front door when they were kids? Do they come by?
Well, two answers. With the cops, the one thing that happened, because this went on for a few years, cops that were smart understood that I was documenting them. Cops that were morons were thinking I was the enemy, and their game was to get me.
Well, those are probably the shitty fucking cops.
Those were the shitty cops, that's right. But the intelligent cops realized that this was history and it was important. And I wasn't there just to sandbag them.
And that you're part of the neighborhood.
And I'm part of the neighborhood. And I'm part of the game. And the other thing that people don't realize is, the heroin thing, as you know, has its whole very diverse subculture attached to it. Protesting and police have the same thing. And when you do it over and over and over again, people become familiar with it. It becomes like war in a way. And then after the war, the generals from America talk to the generals in Vietnam.
There's negotiations.
There's negotiation that takes place. Or there's memories that take place where all of a sudden maybe the 2 top generals, 10 years after the thing. Like one of the cops that I knew that was really intelligent, this guy called Michael Julian. And we became, acquaintances, you could say friends. I don't go drinking at his house for Christmas or anything like that. But, we talked to each other. He moved to Australia. He'd call me when he gets here, that kind of thing. And he became a deputy commissioner. And the smart cops got it. They also got that I was protecting them Because if they had a real asshole in their group, they're not going to say, hey, Clayton, you got to watch that guy. I'm going to know you got to watch that guy. And if he gets taken out because of some documentation, it goes to CCRB or whatever, that can be a bonus for them because the really out-of-control nut job compromises their job. Because once
It's dangerous to have somebody like that.
yeah, and once you're a white shirt, what people don't realize about the police department is it's political.
Here, hold up 1 second.
Okay, so Julian, I had a lot of fights with the cops. My first big fight with Julian was there was a guy there called Officer Kidd, and I told him, I said he's a bad guy, he's a troublemaker, and he's going to give you problems. And Julian's thinking I'm an asshole. You know,
Hey, you're the troublemaker.
Oh, yeah, I'm the troublemaker. You're the shithead. I'm not going to listen to you. Get out of here. Kid went to California for Christmas holiday, and he got picked up on something like rape or something really bad.
Horrible, right?
Really horrible. So all of a sudden, Julian sort of looked at me after he sort of scratched his head and thought, oh, okay. It's not just he hates the police. He hates things were not going correctly because you have to have a defense system for the neighborhood. It's a must.
Well, a good police is a good neighborhood. You know, a good police is somebody who like knows the kids that are on your door, knows who you
right,
are.
Right.
You know, I mean, like, there's something not great. It's like heroin dealing isn't the problem. It's violence around heroin dealing and crime around heroin addiction. The dealing isn't really the issue. It's all the other stuff.
Yeah, if somebody asked me what's bad about heroin, I would say the addiction. I would say not knowing the chemistry of the bag that you're getting because you have no proof of content. The other thing that's really dangerous is if you take a break and you go to the hospital for a few days, you can you come back, you use, you die.
Yeah.
The other thing is how it affects your body, like when you mix it with coke and other things, the formication and the picking yourself. I mean, I think if a person got pharmaceutical heroin and could manage it, they probably wouldn't have a lot of the same problems.
Well, I mean, like, lots of experts talk about treating heroin addiction with legal heroin.
What's a lot better than
Methadone or Suboxone or whatever.
It's very hard to get off methadone.
I was on methadone for 7 years, 6 years.
How long did it take you to get off?
Like, the whole time I was trying to get off, but I wound up kicking really slowly over the course of a year.
There you go. It's usually about a year.
I was in L.A. and I was coming home. That was right before I started working at Katz's. My mom got leukemia. I was in Los Angeles, and I didn't want her to die while I was out there.
Right.
So I kicked real slowly, and then I came back off methadone.
But it can easily take a year.
It took me a year or longer.
I mean, heroin can take you 10 days.
Right. It's not the fentanyl kick sounds like the worst thing in the world.
Is it? Right.
What you want to be is stabilized, and then you want to be reduced. But then the real thing is like, are you ready? Are you willing? Are you ready? You're able if you're willing and you're ready.
Right. And actually, if you watch Captured by Ben Solomon and Dan Levin, you'll see there's a guy in there called Al Miller. Now, I documented Al a lot. I watched his teeth degrade because a lot of times junkies eat a lot of sugar, and his teeth eventually just rotted out of his mouth.
I kind of have that problem.
Yeah, he came over here, and he would shoot up or sniff, and he would, look at his watch and say, okay, it's going to be this many minutes before this sniff hits me, and I'll tell you if it's any good or not. He would tell me where he got the bag. I went out to his place in Brooklyn where he lived. He had a whole setup with an altar and everything. See, that's the other thing with heroin.
The ritual.
Is the ritual. The ritual is a big part of it. And the other thing that gets twisted in here, there's a number of streams that go through heroin. Black magic is another one. And so Al this is a funny story. Not funny, but
Interesting.
So Al is gay, but he doesn't say he's gay. So his brother's living with him, who's obviously not his brother. So they're both heroin addicts, and Al wanted to be a heroin addict. By the way, he said when I reached like middle age, then I'm going to become a heroin guy, and he did. So one day his brother went to the hospital for about 10 days, got out, shot up, died. So Al, he lived in a building with an elevator. Al dragged his brother into the hallway, put him in the elevator, pushed down, and left him in the elevator.
Wow.
And somehow, this is back in the old days. People came, picked him up in an ambulance, whatever, took him away and died. That was it. No big investigation. See,
They just find the dead body in the elevator, and that's the end of him.
yeah, I remember when that guy got shot across the street here when we first moved here. You know, a couple of cops come, they hung up, they pick him up in an ambulance, and he's gone, and that's it. It isn't like you see on TV.
I lived on Norfolk between Stanton and Rivington, and I want to say 1996.
Wow.
Okay, and in the lobby there was a drug crew, and they were selling dope out of there, and I wasn't using dope. You know, I was like smoking weed and whatever.
Right.
And they were really nice guys. You know what I mean? Really nice fucking drug dealers in the building.
But just go ahead.
And no, and like they made me feel safe. Like
Yeah.
they were happy. They knew we paid rent. They
Yeah.
were cool to us. You know what I mean? Like
If
they.
you weren't bothering them, they're just more guys.
And it was more like Katz's guys, where like if you come in every day, they're happy to see you because they know who you are,
Right.
and you're happy to see them, and that's community. At what point, since you've been here, you know, how many years? How many years have you been here?
Well,
Since 1979.
83, so, you know.
83, it's 2023. I don't know. I'm not good at math. It's like 40 years,
like 40
basically.
years.
So have you, obviously, it's not the same place, right? It's not like, it is not dangerous like it was.
Oh, that's where you're mistaken.
Talk to me.
You know, in certain ways, it's more dangerous.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. When you lived here on Norfolk Street, even though some of those guys might have been bad guys and thugs and dangerous and whatever, it wasn't dangerous to you.
No, I felt protected.
You felt protected.
They would tell us if like there was some, like if someone was giving us a ticket or anything was happening.
Somebody's breaking into cars.
Yeah.
They don't want them on the block because
Right.
they don't want the cops there. Nowadays, they've gotten rid of all the corner guys. So what you have are these roving bands from other neighborhoods that come down here and rob people and steal and do whatever. And so, like Delancey Street now, the K2 is the big one down here. Now the K2, like if you know, I documented one guy one day with the K2 and said, "Oh yeah, it keeps me even, it keeps me straight."
That's that synthetic weed, whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
And but if it's mixed with another drug or it's not mixed properly, I mean, there's people jumping on cars. The Chinese girl that got murdered over there and stabbed and so many times, and the craziness that was involved with that was K2.
Right.
And that Christie Park just below Delancey, between Delancey and Broome, that's like K2 heaven. And the other thing is that up and down, especially Delancey Street, it's like there's a lot of stabbings and
Yeah, Delancey is not what it used to be for
No.
sure. It's not like the crossing Delancey days for sure.
That's right. And when you were on Norfolk Street, if you went around the corner after you lived there for a year or two, you know, none of those dealers would bother you, even though you're a white guy on the street, because you know who they are. They know who you are. Nobody bothers anybody. And the other thing that's really detrimental or really tragic for me is a lot of those people really are just nice, good people.
Totally.
They're just really, they're not bad people.
They're
not-
neighborhood people.
They're just neighborhood people. It's like the LA2 with the steering. It was the only real business that was down here. So a lot of these kids got pulled into it because it was a business. And it was a way to make easy money. Al's game was credit cards. He'd go out and steal credit cards, or what he would do is go through the newspaper and see the people that died, and he would look for a doctor or somebody like that, and then he would apply for a credit card under that person's name, and then he'd get the credit card, and then he'd go over to the guys, you know, selling dope, and say, okay, well, I'll buy you some sneakers, buy you some gold chains, I'll trade you, you know, product for product.
And that's the barter, the great
that's
barter system.
The great barter system.
Well, and so, but you're saying that maybe the neighborhood isn't. It's dangerous in a different way.
It's dangerous in a different way.
And but heroin has definitely been pushed out. Or has it not?
I don't know. What are you smoking?
Me, nothing. Thank God.
The reason I tell you that or ask you that is the system has changed.
Okay.
I mean, now it's deliveries and things.
Last time I got heroin on the Lower East Side, I had somebody delivering it to me, and I had a guy in a project on Water Street.
Right.
You know, like, and I remember one of my relapses. I was with a friend of mine who actually wound up dying, and he was like, "You can't get dope anymore." And I was like, "I promise you, if I go to Avenue D, I can get dope." And we went to Avenue D, and I got dope.
Right.
But it wasn't Norfolk Street.
No, but probably if you lived on Norfolk Street and you had the telephone number, you could probably get it. And coke and all that for sure.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of drugs down here still. You just don't.
It's
see
not the same. It's not. But you were also here in the days of the bucket and the hole in the wall, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and the stories. Like Ann would tell me, like, she knew that they were going to get busted on Norfolk Street or on First Street, but 7-Up. So the guy called Franco ran it. So she ran over and told Franco, "Look, you got to get out of here. The cops are coming and whatever." So somehow she stopped the cab, hopped in a cab, and took him off the block and around the neighborhood. So she basically saved him, and he didn't cut her any kind of deal after that. You'd think that he'd have flipped her some drugs, but no.
Fucked up.
And the other problem with the heroin really was, or any of the drugs, the coke, even, I'll get to pot in a minute, but was that people didn't know what to do with the money. You see, it's like we were talking before about getting something published. You got to know a publisher. When you get your radio show going, you have to have somebody that can market it and get it out there. And if you make a lot of money, money's useless unless you can use it. And that's why you have millions of dollars under somebody's bed. I mean, some of these guys are making $60,000 on a night on a weekend down here with the amount of the volume of drugs they were selling. It was huge.
And they're addicted to the money too.
And they're addicted to the money, but they couldn't do anything with the money.
Because it's not detached. Well, I mean, they could do a little bit with it, but you can't buy a house or something.
Well, you could buy a house, but they didn't buy a house. They didn't think about it. Oh, okay, what do I do with my money? I'm going to buy a house.
Right.
They didn't have the
dream mechanism
or
was
the
fucked.
economic skills or knowledge.
Right.
So they just were good at gathering the money. They needed really a money manager once they had it. Most of them didn't have that. But we just skipped to pot for a minute. Pot was dangerous down here. I mean, I know a number of people that got murdered on pot because the money in pot was as big as it was in heroin at that time. And so it wasn't as big a charge. If you got caught, you're not going to get 20 years. But
it's still a charge, though.
Like Mickey the Pope, he was on 10th, and this is an interesting story. He was on 10th between Avenue B between 10th and 11th. And Mickey the Pope is the guy that did the first major marijuana delivery system. He'd been in Amsterdam before. He's the guy that brought pot above ground in Amsterdam because he used to go to all the clubs and sell it, like Milky Way. There was a number of clubs over there. And so he got the distribution above ground going. He had a boat where he used to sell pot over. And then he got shot in Amsterdam, so he got thrown out of the country. So he came back here. He's on B between 10th and 11th. And the hitman tried to extort him for money because he was making good money. And it was a drug block. And he just said, piss off. So they went over and shot him 5 times, and he survived. He was a big fat guy. He said it was like oil coming out of his skin.
Right.
And then he came back on the block. Now the interesting thing is, in documenting the neighborhood, I eventually got to who shot him. I knew one of the kids that shot him, and so I talked to him about that. But before Mickey died, I wanted to take him up to introduce him to Mickey, but he just wasn't into it. I thought, that whole Catholic thing, forgiveness.
Sure, redemption,
redemption, all of that. But he wasn't into that. Big murder around the corner here. There was a kid, a very famous skater at the time, that was, they used to sell pot in that building. And they had like 125 pounds of pot in a trunk. And there was over 2 floors. And so... I just had his name a second ago. People in skating would know it. Jeremy Henderson.
Okay.
Because he would be on the cover of Thrasher and like that. So what happened is he got all wrapped up. They came in. They busted into the place. Because the one difference between heroin and pot was heroin, they're paranoid and they're on point. You got a guy at the door. You got
also heroin is small. Like the amount of heroin is tiny, and weed is pounds and fucking couch cushions and shit.
But with weed, it's like... the door's ringing. Who's at the door? Oh, let him in.
Right.
It's just casual. So these guys from the neighborhood went upstairs, opened the door, and put a gun through the door, and the guy upstairs and shot and killed him. And it really freaked Jeremy out. After that, because he was also the distributor there. The guy upstairs had it, and then he was like the guy all the skaters came to and everything. He sold good weed. I smoked weed. But
you don't smoke weed anymore?
Well, I find weed to be an addiction like cigarettes. I could quit alcohol even though I'm drinking a lot, whatever, because I know the damage it does to me. But with pot, it's so sneaky and so easy to do. And then once I start smoking it, it's like cigarettes. I'm back. Got kicked out of AA because they didn't want to hear about pot. So I thought, screw you, and I left. But anyway.
They're willing to hear more about it now.
Well, this was about 2 weeks ago.
No way. You went to AA 2 weeks ago and they kicked you out for talking about bud?
Well, what happened is I went there for like a year and a half. And
Where'd you go?
A place called.
Okay.
And so one of the things one day I started talking about pot as an addiction. One girl rolled her eyes, and that really pissed me off, and I brought that up. And then the last time was the guy, they have these after talks and things, and the guy said, "Look, Clayton, I come here for alcohol, and alcohol is my thing. And I'm sorry that you're addicted to this, or it maybe, crunches you or whatever. But, I'm not here to hear what I got to say. I'm here about alcohol." So I thought, okay, fine, and I left. But for me, it's an addiction.
Are you still smoking?
I'm not.
How long have you not smoked for?
About 4 or 5 days.
That's amazing. I'm addicted to weed too.
Are you?
I smoked weed every day from like age 17 to age like 39 or something.
How hard was it for you to get off?
Well, in the end, I had kicked methadone, and I kicked heroin, and I kicked Xanax, and I kicked Klonopin, and I didn't want to stop smoking weed.
Right.
I really loved weed. I loved my whole identity.
And it's good for you.
I loved everything about it. I loved how it smelled, how it looked, how I put it in my nose, everything about it.
Yeah.
In the end, I found that I was negotiating shit to smoke that just didn't make any sense.
No, absolutely.
And I had heard so many times, like I never drank, like I was never a drinker, and I don't talk about being in AA, but I'm in AA. But I went because I remember when I was in rehab for heroin and for methadone, they would talk about obsession being lifted, and I was obsessed with getting my wife back, and I was obsessed with getting my daughter back, and I was obsessed with pot, like being a stoner. I wanted to be a stoner.
It is obsession.
And I did 12-step shit to have the obsession be lifted.
Well, you're lucky, because the other thing is it clouds your thinking. You start realizing you're just missing a step. It's kind of like I sort of you have a bag of coal on your back with a hole in it, and it's just sort of like you're as the coal drops out, that's kind of your opportunities and things drop out because you just miss steps.
Right, you miss stuff. You miss stuff all over the place.
You miss stuff all over the place.
Because but I think that also has to do with the actual time you take to smoke, and then the time where you're actually high. And those are the moments where the things fall out of the bag. It's like when you're not smoking and you're not high, you're still like, as a creative person, you're like about this, and this. And then maybe you get high and you chill, and then you go back to the creative stuff. Without the bud, you get this little area of follow through between the creating and the sleeping. You know what I mean?
And after a while, it's not that creating.
No, that's the thing. I mean, I had this moment the other day, and I haven't been able to explain this, and maybe you're going to help me. Mm-hmm. Like, I think about bud all the time, especially, like, it's everywhere now in this different way. It's like, there's nuggets all over the place. You just look at, I mean, it's not like it was.
No.
It's like, and they're big, huge prints of beautiful bud and stuff.
And the other thing was the hunt.
Right, that was exciting.
There was always a hunt to get weed.
It was fun, too. It was like innocuous. It wasn't like the hunt to get heroin.
Right.
I liked the hunt to get heroin, too, but the hunt to get bud was fun.
So tell me more about what you were saying.
Okay, so I had this thought. I was actually driving to an AA meeting, and I was thinking about how much I liked smoking pot.
Right.
And I liked the ritual of that, too. I liked getting bud and coming home and like cleaning my bong and icing it up and taking a bong hit and the excitement before it, right? And then I kind of thought about the promise of smoking, of like packing the bong and smoking, and then the promise is kind of unfulfilled. You know what I'm saying?
Always.
Like you have this moment that you think it's going to be amazing, and then maybe for a second it is, but then every other second afterwards is a diminishment from the promise of something great.
Well, see, that's when I started to drink more, because I would drink to boost up the high.
Right.
That was one of the reasons it was hard to get off alcohol, because the pot, after a while, very seldom does it give you that really great high.
And it can't last. Nothing can last. But sobriety, at least you can, I mean, it's consistent,
Sobriety is better.
It's consistent. And it's like I have as a fucking total heroin addict and pill head and pot head and all those things, my life really gets worse. Like in those situations, even if I'm just smoking weed every day, my life gets worse. With sobriety, there's a lot of opportunity for it to get better, and nothing's going to ruin me, like, except me.
Right.
And I like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'll tell you another pot story.
Please.
So, well, God, there's a few of them.
I appreciate, though, you being candid about that. And, like, I know a shitload of meetings that you could talk about it.
Yeah, it's you know, I mean, there's no shame in it for me. I mean, you know, it's like, you know, that's one of my addictions. That was an addiction that I had, and that's the way it is. And I'm not working in the corporate world. I don't really give a shit, and it was nothing, did anything really criminal or anything. But there's a lot of crime attached to pot. And so, like a friend of mine, Charles Kritzky, he was on Fifth Street, and people knew that he had this pot coming in. And they ended up, he got murdered for it because he wouldn't give it up. It was like $60,000 or $90,000, which, you know, back in those days was a lot of money. And then the other thing that happened, I had this guy over here, this friend that, he worked with this woman, this Linda Twigg. She was like, ran gambling, and I can mention her name now because she's dead. And there's nothing about this story that's attached to her that can bring anybody else into harm. But part of the reason I mention it is because she should be a book. All of this stuff should be a book. I know a lot of outlaw culture from the Lower East Side. And if people, you know, you want to meet Patti Smith, don't come to me. You know, she's got a manager, you know. But the people I know are much more outlaw culture. And so what happened is, she was a big pot dealer. So one day she had this much younger boyfriend. And so he came over to me, so I was sweating it, and says, Clayton, you got to help me out, because Linda was going nuts at this time. There were heroin dealers upstairs. This was on First, between First and Second, and the guys that ran the block were upstairs from her, but she was this, you know, white woman that, you know, had gambling in the Chelsea Hotel. You know, I'm sure they're worried about being mobbed up or something like that, so they wouldn't just go down there and blast her, right? Too high profile. So he came to me and said, Clayton, you got to help me out here. So I knew the guy. So there was a T-shirt guy over here with a guy called Eddie. Now Eddie ran that place. I used to buy weed from him years ago when he used to be on Allen Street. So I went over and talked to him, and he played me slick. I said, hey, look, this thing with Linda is going to get out of control. It's dangerous and it's crazy, and her boyfriend is really worried about it. So I said, hey, look. So he gave me a big bud, and I said, look, I'll talk to some people. So this guy plays me. It's no big deal. Don't worry about it. We got it totally out of control. You know, you're hyping it up. Relax. So the next day, and I think this was dirty, these cops came in and raided the place. And what happened first is they were going to do a big deal on pot. I think it was another one of these $60,000 deals, right? So they had the pot there, and the cop says, okay, the customer, let's call him the customer, said, okay, we're going to go outside and get the money. So they go outside, and they come rushing back in with their guns out and stuff like that. So Dave, the young nervous kid, shot and killed a cop. Now I'm thinking, wow, he didn't seem to have a bulletproof vest on. I've done, that's the other thing I've done down here. I've documented a lot of raids, because TNT used to park over here. They called them TNT because it was Tuesday and Thursday. That's when they always showed up.
That's so funny.
And they used to show up like at 4 o'clock. So Elsa and I would be waiting here in the store, and we'd see the cops leave, and they were always, because it's between Delancey and House, and it was an area we could run to, and we got a lot of drug busts. And so he shot and killed the cop. But I'm thinking there was no big St. Patrick's Day funeral. They rented the place out for
Why do you suppose that was?
I suspect within that culture, he was probably doing the wrong thing.
Right. He was like a fucked up cop in some kind of way.
It probably wasn't registered. It probably wasn't part of the agenda for the day.
Right. He was doing something else.
He was doing something else. I think he was coming out of the 9th. He wasn't from the 7th, where TNT and those places come out of. He was probably doing something else. So, you know, nobody said anything bad. But just the tokens around it, like the fact that there was no big Fifth Avenue St. Patrick's Day parade or funeral. The other thing that happened was that there was a TV show that was shot. They put a wreath above on the fire escape. And so the wreath is there. I have a photograph of that somewhere. But in the first couple of months, maybe within the first 3 months, they shot a TV show in there. And I'm thinking, out of the thousands or hundreds of thousands of storefronts that you could run a TV show out of, why would the cops allow them to get a permit to go to that place? Because you have to go to the police department to get a permit. So why would they do that? Usually that would be sacred ground. Get out of here. You can't be here. You can't have this here. You got to leave.
But they gave permission anyway.
To shoot a stinky old TV show.
That's weird.
That's what I thought.
How much of a fan were you of Ouija, that old crime photographer?
Ouija's a genius.
So you love that stuff?
I love Ouija.
Yeah, because
I love photography. I love looking at it. I don't care whose photographs they are. I love photography. I mean, Richard Avedon, the women's from the 50s. I think it was a big mistake when he went out west, because when he did that Western series, all those people looking at the camera and thinking, why are you taking my picture? There's just something weird about this. They all have this scared look, like he caught deer in the headlights. But his fashion show photographs of
amazing.
women, beautiful. And then the other guy from the Times that used to shoot the women on 57th Street, what was his name? Not McDougal. I'll think of it. But I loved his photographs. And the people the news photographers, I love their work. I love, just so much of that kind of photography that I love
life.
photography.
It's New York City too. It's
New
like
York City
you're capturing inside a frame all this life, all this magic. It's incredible.
It is
we have
incredible.
to figure out what the fuck we're supposed to do now. You have this crazy archive. You have this really deep burning ambition and desire to get it out.
Yeah, I mean, I have painting. I have my wife Elsa's a great painting. We have the history of the cast, the history of the dope bags. I have a lot of documentation of the neighborhood. Photographs, videos of drugs, poetry, art, mostly underground stuff. But I need to be discovered by somebody who can do something with it.
I wish I could discover you.
I wish I could discover myself.
Well, there you go. But Clayton, I can't thank you for your time.
It's been amazing.
It's very nice to finally meet you and sit down with you.
I really appreciate you doing that.
All right, that was Clayton Patterson, and I think I made it clear. I've seen him come in and out of Katz's for the past 15 years, and everyone's like, "Oh shit, it's Clayton."
Yeah, I mean, I knew him just like the hat, like he made those hats.
How did you even know about the hats, though?
Because there were a lot of articles and things that I read about him. He was in a lot of fashion magazines.
Really?
Yeah.
So you were like, "Oh, Clayton Patterson, I know him."
In a vague way. There were a lot of things that I didn't know. I didn't know about that insane dope bag collection, which I am dying to see.
I know. We recorded that in his storefront on Essex Street, but it's old New York. I mean, and when I say old New York, it's it's a storefront. It's like a storefront with tiles, and then you go to the next room, and it's one of these lofts that's just full of his art in boxes, compiled all this art, and then there's a little kitchen, and then I think there's some rooms off of it. But it's totally. I used to get drugs from this printmaker on Green Street, who was an artist also. He was a printmaker and a professor at Brooklyn College, and we called him the Professor. And his place looked just like Clayton's. It was it's so similar.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't know about the fact that was his footage during the '88 Tompkins Square Park riots.
Right.
The thing that I liked so much about it was that he has been documenting a certain time and space, occupying and documenting this time and space in New York that doesn't really exist anymore, and is certainly entwined with drug history in New York, 100%.
Yeah, and he is that. I mean, it's when I got to Katz's, right, in 2008, I want to say. I had been in California for many, many years, and New York had really changed from, the late 90s to 2008. And what I loved about Katz's more than anything is it reminded me of the New York that I had grown up in.
Right.
And it was really mostly because of the Dominican guys that I work with all came from, Brooklyn or the projects or whatever. And there was an old school vibe to that. And I grew up in public housing, right? Very adjacent to the projects. And I remember there was this kid that I worked with named Jeffrey, and he wore this purple t-shirt that had a font that said, "I missed the old New York" in New York Times font. And I was like, oh man, and Clayton is old New York. And,
Absolutely.
and Katz is old New York.
Yeah. I mean, my dad moved to New York when I was like 8 years old, like around 8 years old. And I mean, the New York that like I grew up coming to on a regular basis to see my dad every year was not the New York that we have now. And like some of the things that like some of the only things that still exist are institutions like Katz's, Zabar's. There's like certain things that we would do when I was a kid that are still there.
Russ and Daughters.
Yeah, I was just going to say Russ and Daughters.
And then like big things like parks.
Yes.
And like the New York Times still exists, but for how long? And Broadway still exists, but Times Square, like my dad was just complaining that he walks down the street and there's too much weed in the air and it gives him a headache.
Oh, well, there's definitely a lot of weed in the air in New York now. I live right near Washington Square Park, and it is just like, poof.
Yeah, it's robustly full of weed.
Yeah.
And people are also saying that post-COVID, like it's like not the old New York, it's pre-old New York right now, because it's like so fucking like businesses are closed. You know, there's more crime. I know you don't like to say this for some reason.
It's not
but
that-
you walk down the street, businesses are fucking closed.
Yes. Well, my neighborhood is pretty
That's because of NYU. Because those businesses like have population.
Yeah, but also like new restaurants have opened up and stuff. Like I feel like my neighborhood feels normal like right now. It feels
by
like
Katz's, most everything is closed.
I
And if
believe
you
it.
walk-
Midtown is really closed.
decimated.
Right?
And
Yeah.
if you walk from here to Katz's, you're going to walk past,
Right.
dead spot after dead spot.
There's definitely like 6th Avenue, which is not far from me, like down in the Village. Like there's a lot of closed businesses there. Yeah, I mean, it's different, but it's not like this doesn't feel like New York in the 80s.
Not to me, but I mean, I think I told you the story. I know I told the story on Dopey where I was walking to work and some pregnant woman, came up to me crying in the street because someone had just spit in her face in Union
You
Square.
did tell me that.
And there's like fucking shit going on.
I will say that I feel like there's been an uptick in like that kind of stuff where somebody just like goes off on somebody for no reason. I've been much more, and because of that, I've been like much more just sort of, I'm just really conscious of people. I in my life have a tendency to like be in situations where like there's somebody who maybe has mental health issues and is volatile, and I'm pretty good at de-escalating stuff like that, but that's risky, you know.
Yeah, I don't recommend that to anyone in the
No,
Dopey
I
Nation.
know.
I don't recommend that at all.
My husband doesn't recommend that for me.
Especially at this point,
I know.
at this time in New York, like Penn Station is like fucking just. I don't know. I'm finding there's more madness, but I'm also finding that it's de-escalating now, like 6 months later. But it's warm. Who knows? I'm like a old Jewish guy, so
Yeah.
like I know to be cautious. And
Yeah.
and you're a little bit too footloose and fancy free out there, I think.
not
And it's
footloose
interesting
and-
though because
no,
we're the
I'm-
same age.
I'm pretty, I guess like I'm pretty like I know how to like fight if I have to, right? I don't want to. I really don't want to.
You're not gonna fucking fight against some homeless man
I
who's like
understand.
fucking. You're gonna fight? What are you gonna do? Do judo?
No,
What are you gonna do?
I just mean in terms of like, I don't know how to describe
I
it.
think that you're making me nervous. You better fucking not be
I don't go.
de-escalating.
Listen, I don't go stick my nose in things.
You
but
know how
if
to
I'm
fight? What do you mean? If some crazy person pulls a knife out of his thing, what are you gonna do?
no, I'm not going to fight somebody with a knife. That was the wrong thing to say. That was
What
the wrong thing to
fighting are
say.
you trained in?
I'm not trained in any fighting, but I definitely have that thing like in fight or flight. I'm fight.
Yeah, I'm
like
I'm
my
flight.
my adrenaline takes over when I've been mugged. I physically fought with the people and scratched them, and like both cases they got caught because like one guy got his wallet. He took my purse, but I took his wallet. I mean, like I'm not like I go. It's not a good trait. I'm not saying this is a good thing, but that like if somebody like physically harms me, I don't like I go into fight mode.
Well, now I'm worried. Let's move on to some emails here because I don't want to see you fighting with some crazy
No,
person
I'm
on
not.
the street.
I'm not going to. I promise. And what I just said is that I'm much more conscious.
Fucking
right
Aaron's
now.
like picking fights in the street.
I don't pick fights.
He's like,
and
yo, he's like, that's your jacket? I think that's my jacket.
9 times out of 10, Like, listen, there are people I don't make eye contact with because I know if you make eye contact with them, it's not going to be good.
Like, yo, let me hold your Walkman. I ain't going to take it.
But I also know that if you are confronted with something, a lot of times there are people that just want somebody to listen to them and like give them a word of validation.
You're scaring the shit out of me, okay? All right, here we go.
Wait, I had one more thing to say.
What? What else do you have to say? Now you're making me you're going to fight homeless people?
No, listen, there's no fighting. I'm not talking about fighting homeless people. Stop.
Okay.
Don't put,
Okay.
people are going to.
I'm worried. I'm just worried.
I just wanted to say the other thing that stood out to me in your interview is that you discussed haggling. And we had this discussion the other day. I'm a terrible haggler. Terrible.
You can call me Marvin Hagler because
Yeah.
I'm fucking haggling.
Yes,
I don't give a
yes.
fuck. I love haggling.
I know. I admire it. I'm just not a haggler.
I don't haggle as much as I would like.
Yeah.
If it was a perfect world, I'd like what Clayton said. I'd be haggling at Kalahari.
Right.
I would, and things are very overpriced at Kalahari.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right, here we go. Do you want to hear the person checking my Benadryl use, or do you want to hear the person that mentions you?
Mentions me.
Okay. Hey, Dave, please don't use my full name. Maybe don't even use my first name.
All right.
I'm an alcoholic and sex addict, and I started listening to Dopey after you crushed on Marin. Keep up the amazing work. I live in the East Village, grew up near the city, and have lived in New York City for a while. I don't fight with homeless people because I know that's crazy. That's so weird.
Oh, that is really
No,
weird.
it doesn't really say that.
Oh.
I love hearing about your local antics and anecdotes. I think about Dopey every time I walk my dog by Katz's, which is often. I deeply appreciate how inclusive you are regarding all addictions on Dopey. Sex addiction is extremely isolating and stigmatized, and frankly has taken many of us to some very dark places. It is perhaps the least socially accepted of the addictions. The rise of the internet porn, webcams, social media, personals websites, etc., have blown like a tidal wave over a multitude of those susceptible to compulsive sexual behavior and provided an easily accessible escape that feels like an epidemic. Imagine if your dope was on your phone, computer, TV, etc. The story of all who find themselves addicted to substances or compulsive behaviors is the same. A need to fill a spiritual void or cope with all that overwhelms us in our lives, which evolves into a dependence and cyclical downward spiral. It is a little less isolating for you to include sex addiction, and I highly recommend you find and prod some real perverts to come on Dopey. Amen. There are some bizarre and very special examples of insanity within sex addiction that are classic Dopey. All jokes aside, for many sex addicts, their compulsive behaviors, it's funny that she says their, not our, have clear victims, and there aren't any laughs in the stories of their acting out. The betrayal inherent in compulsive sexual behavior has destroyed many marriages and left many partners devastated and families ruptured. Voyeurs have traumatized people. Those who have committed sexual abuse have seriously hurt people and devastated lives. Those who engage with sex workers contribute to a system that is often dangerous and ripe with intimidation and violence. Sometimes I don't know how to find the way to overcome the shame and hurt my addiction has caused. How can sex addicts find freedom from their shame in a society that really doesn't accept them? And when it is shame that is often a foundational element in the development of the addiction in the first place? I really don't know how this cycle can be relieved. I am in no way making excuses for wrong done and hurt caused. There are personal and legal restrictions that are important and necessary for many people, and any victims and potential victims must be given any safety that can be afforded them, and people who have hurt people must have serious consequences. I'd be unbelievably grateful if this ever came up in a segment of Ask Aaron.
Oh.
Aaron Carr has been an amazing and insightful addition to the show, even though she finds a need to humble brag and fight homeless people from time to time. Sorry. She
That
doesn't say
wasn't
it.
in there.
Dave, you're very special, hilarious, quirky, and a great interviewer. Despite any financial goals you have for Dopey, it is an incredible gift of service to all in recovery, and I'm very grateful to have found it. Take care, and toodles for Chris. Q. So can we do this as our first Ask Aaron?
Sure.
Or
Yeah.
only Ask Aaron because
Sure.
we're going to run out of time?
Every time we record, I bring a handful of printed Ask Aarons, and I bring the same ones every time because we never get to them.
Well, there's room. There's
All right,
still
all
time.
right, all right.
So what do you have to say about this? This is a plea for all sex addicts.
Yeah, I mean, so was there an actual question? Or just talking about like reducing stigma for people with sex addiction?
There was a question here. How can sex addicts find freedom from their shame in a society that
Sure.
really doesn't accept them? And when it is shame that is often a foundational element in the development of the addiction in the first place, I really don't know how this cycle can be relieved. So really, how can this cycle be relieved?
So I mean,
Ask Aaron.
I think the same way that it's relieved with anything that's highly stigmatized. I mean, I've said, I don't know if I don't think I said this in my book, but I say this often, is that, you know, there's that quote, like trauma being the gateway drug. Like my gateway drug was shame. Like 100% my gateway drug was shame. And that shame came from being sexually abused. And then, you know, certainly compulsive sexual behavior was part of my addiction. I mean, I acted out not just, I mean, around like sex and romantic relationships in general, like that. And that was something that didn't, you know, completely disappear when I stopped using drugs. I had to sort of like work on like the way that I sabotaged my intimate relationships.
How did you get through it?
I mean, for me, it was talk therapy, a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, so that the things that were triggering me to want to act out, I found, like, I learned like coping mechanisms, you know, which are the similar things that we do for things that trigger us to use drugs, right? So you find coping mechanisms that instead of immediately going and acting out, you do this other thing.
Right. So it's
Like,
very similar.
It's very similar. And I think as far as the shame goes, like, I was just telling Dave before we started recording today that I had like my most recent Amazon review was like somebody like basically just like that they didn't like my book because I had too much sex. And there isn't even that much sex in my book.
That
but
book is wall to wall
It is
titillation.
not.
That's like, it's like reading a Penthouse Forum. I just need to be clear about this.
Totally not.
So buy Strung Out and like, holy shit, that is one juicy read, titillating read.
It's not, and there's nothing.
It's just guy after guy, position after position.
It's not explicit, whatever. So this person said, "Oh, I couldn't fit like all her sexual partners into 3 of my lifetimes."
Right, shaming you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just, like, I don't feel shame about that stuff anymore because what the fuck am I going to do about it now? I think that you can get to a certain, I think for me, getting rid of that shame was becoming very honest about it. And obviously, not everybody has to become honest about it in as public of a way as I did. But I think that being honest with it, whether it's with, if you're working a 12-step program with a sponsor, or if it's with a therapist, or it's with your best friend, I think that just being honest about it it feels scary, but then like what? I mean, like somebody's gonna like, I if you put all your so-called skeletons from the closet like out in the open, nobody can hold anything over your head anymore. What are they gonna say? Oh, you were a junkie? Oh, you fucked people?
It's like
whatever.
It's like Eminem at the end of 8 Mile when he rhymes about all the ammunition that the other crew will have about him.
Right.
Well, and the great cliche in 12-step is you're only as sick as your secrets.
Yeah.
So if you have secrets, they fester. You know, and shame festers, secret festers. Talk to people, listen to people.
Yeah.
You're not alone. You're not the only one.
No, and I think that like over time that shame dissipates. The more that you are able to sort of like accept it, because we're not just one thing. Like your sex addiction doesn't define you. You are more than your sex addiction. You are like, I don't know who this person is, but they're
Q.
You know, Q is, yeah, right. So like they have like their friendships or their interests or their relationships, their family, their friends, whatever. There's all these other things that define them. They're not just one thing. Somebody can be like a, you know, like $1,000 a day junkie and also a really good friend. I mean, like I'm not saying that like people when they're in active addiction are in the best place to be a friend. But what I'm saying is that we're not just one thing. It's not a black and white issue. We are, you can hold more than one truth at the same time. And the thing that I say to people when they ask me if I have shame about XYZ anymore is that, like, I carried that shame for a long fucking time and I'm done. And like, if somebody else thinks I should feel ashamed of it, and
So you don't feel ashamed about anything?
not
Nothing.
anymore. I mean, do I regret things? Like, would I go back and do them differently? Yes, but it doesn't serve me to be why. Like, I already went through the shame about them. Like, do I feel shitty that I bought drugs off of a 12-year-old? Fuck yes, I feel shitty about that. But like, I don't feel shame about it anymore. I was addicted to heroin and crack, and in a very, very sick place, and part of a whole ecosystem of drug user and seller that is connected to other systemic issues. That doesn't relieve me of responsibility, but it doesn't do me any good to continue to feel shame about it because I've accepted that I did it.
Right. And it's also, I think there's a real danger for people who get addicted to their shame.
Yeah,
And
that's
they
why
get-
I'm saying that was my first drug. It was
Right.
so scary that I had to like feel it and like live it
It's
and
your
embody
precious.
it.
It's your precious thing.
Yeah.
And then so you have this precious thing that you're protecting and that you're also medicating. So you need to like talk to people, give up the shame, give yourself a break. Fucking ask Aaron. Write us. Right, where do they write you, Aaron?
They can write me at askaaron@aaroncarr.com. They can DM me. They can whatever. You can email dopeypodcast@gmail.com. But I just want to say one more quick thing is that the other thing is that anybody who wants you to carry that shame, that says so much more about their character than it does about yours. Fuck them. That's what I have to say.
All right. Oh, wow. That's a tear. Now, before we go, I got a really short voicemail.
Okay.
I like to play voicemails
right.
on the show.
Let's hear it.
So we got a really short voicemail from our friend in Kansas. Okay.
Okay.
Josh, I think his name is. Here we go.
Hi Dave, my name is Josh. People call me Smitty. I'm from Kansas. I found you guys by accident on Prime Music, and then I ended up listening to you on Spotify, and that's where I met Chris, is at the very beginning. It was really hard to hear what happened to him. I kind of became attached to the way you guys work together. So now I can't wait for the new episodes to come out every week. But here's a quick story. I was living in Kansas City, and I went down to the projects to score a crack rock, and this black guy came out with just kind of trotting out to my truck. Like, it just was funny to me because he looked so graceful. Like, this guy really knows what he's doing. He came trotting up to my truck, and I rolled down the window, and I held out my hand. He said, "What do you want?" I said, "A 20, and he dropped it in my hand, and I gave him a $20 bill and drove off. I looked down after I got a couple blocks away, couldn't wait to load it in the pipe, and it was a penny. Dude threw a penny in my hand. So I gave up for the day that day, and I went home. But anyway, it's a quick and funny one. Stay strong, Duppy Nation. Toodles for Chris.
All right. Thank you, Josh. And just in the future, if you're recording a Dopey voicemail, do it when the tractor is turned off or the motorboat
combine.
the motorboat is not running, or the motorcycle. But I like that, getting
Yeah.
ripped off with a penny.
Yeah.
That's always fun.
That's pretty genius.
Josh gets free socks. There's a woman, I think her name is Rachel. Oh, fuck. Rachel, you have socks in the mail. If I owe anybody anything, please let me know. Also, if you want Dopey gear, please buy some. It's at dopeypodcast.com. The new Dopey Buddha shit is beautiful. It's beautiful. And there's all sorts of other Dopey gear available from our friends at SRO Prints. They are a printing company out of Cincinnati, Ohio. They're junkies. Support them at sroprints.com if you need printing done. If you want Dopey gear, get it at dopeypodcast.com. If you want to, it's like summertime, but I still have Big Bird beanies. If you want a Big Bird beanie, let's hook it up at Dopey, at just me. Message me on Instagram. I'm distracted because Aaron's fucking taking pictures. The fuck are you doing?
I'm doing a TikTok.
What's the TikTok going to be?
You.
Me advertising?
No, I'm going to put music over it.
Buy Dopey material. All right. So, Aaron, you thought this was a good one? Oh,
I do.
These selfies.
It's
man.
not a selfie.
You should
I'm
look
trying
at
to
her,
do a TikTok.
Look at her looking at herself in the mirror in the phone. Anyway, thank you, Ask Aaron. Thank you, Clayton Patterson. Thank you, Josh. If you're relapsing, try to get your shit together. Stay strong, Dopey Nation, and fucking toodles for Chris.
Toodles.
I wanna take a walk around the world. I wonder would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, then I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. But I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And I wanna take a ride up in the sky. Watch this aeroplane just pass me by. And I wanna see a Lear jetliner take a dive, just to show all of these people what it means to be alive. But I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And my shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's time to where I stand. Shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's time to where I stand. And I wonder would they pay it any mind when I leave this busted city far behind. I'll take the high road, however far it winds, because peace and love are very, very, very hard to find. And I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be good so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. Damn it, all these suckers make me mad. And it's all I ever had. And it's all I ever had. And these suckers make me mad, and I wanna call my dad. And it's all I ever had. 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 And these suckers make me mad, and it's all I ever had. And I wanna call my dad. And it's all I ever had. And it's all I ever had. And it's all I ever had.